Deep within an old abandoned Klyptonian fort, Seth was sneaking past the bandits that had taken up the fort as their base. Seth, while a seasoned fighter, knew his odds of taking out 20-plus bandits were low. Luckily, his current job wasn't to take them out, but to retrieve a certain item. It was a small gem called the Jewel of Change. Seth had no idea what it did, but that didn't matter. The wizard it was stolen from was willing to pay him 10,000 gold if he returned it to him, which was enough money to support him for the next few years. He continued to sneak around until he found the room where they stashed all their stolen goods. He crouched by the door and pulled out his lockpicks. He then began picking the lock, breaking a few lockpicks before he managed to get it open. Seth slowly opened the door and sneaked inside. Then he closed the door gently so as to not alert anyone. He looked around the room and was pretty impressed with the bandits' haul so far. There was a pile of gold with gems mixed throughout it, and even valuable weapons and artifacts. Seth began to loot everything he could. He ended up with a nice 231 gold, 7 ruby gems, a spell book, 5 health potions, a single slice of cheese, and most importantly, a special box containing the Jewel of Change. After adding everything to his inventory, Seth headed back to the door, opened it, and looked around. No one was coming, which was perfect. It was so easy to steal from these guys. Seth was smirking as he made his way out of the fort. He nearly made it out, but suddenly he heard someone start yelling back where he had come from. They had already figured out that they had been robbed. Seth stood up and started running, thinking it was better to get out of there quickly than to try and hide. That may have been a mistake, as he triggered some of the traps built into the fort. The first one was a wall of spikes that nearly turned him into a kebab. The second was an oil trap, and while he avoided it easily, it allowed the bandits to know where to go because of the noise. Seth made it outside and was met by a small group of bandits. He drew his steel axe and charged at the first guy. His axe slammed into the bandit's wooden shield, breaking it in half and chopping the guy's arm off. He fell to the ground screaming, and Seth moved toward the 2 other guys. One was wielding a sword, and the other a bow and arrow. Seth dodged several of the archer's arrows as he ran at the bandit wielding the sword. His axe clashed with the man's sword, and they sat there locked for a moment, which nearly gave the archer a chance to shoot Seth with an arrow. Luckily, Seth managed to break free and move, which made the arrow pierce the other bandit's chest. Seth turned toward the archer, who was now out of arrows. He smirked and waved his hand at the bandit as a challenge. The archer got furious and charged bare-handed at Seth, who responded by pulling out his steel dagger and throwing it into his head. Seth collected his dagger and ran to the gate. He began to pull it open when he heard someone from the top of the fort shout a command to kill the intruder. He turned around and saw several other bandits begin to pour out of the base. Among them were 2 orcs, both quite tall and muscular, and wearing full orcish armor. Seth had a little chance of beating them in a fight, never mind the remaining bandits coming out and joining the fight, which they definitely would. Seth grabbed his axe and started to hack away at the wooden gate. He managed to break it apart right as a barrage of arrows started to fly at him. He ran out of the gate and made his way into the forest. He ran a couple of miles and thought he was in the clear. He leaned against a tree and attempted to catch his breath when he had a sudden bad feeling. He dropped to the ground, and as he did, the tree he was leaning against fell down. He turned his head to see something had cut through the tree, right at the level his head was at. He found out what it was when one of the orcs came jumping out of the leaves wielding a battle axe. Seth rolled to avoid the orc slamming down on him with the battle axe. At the end of his roll, he managed to get onto his feet. He started running again when the other orc came out of nowhere and hit him in the back with his warhammer. Seth was thrown forward and was in a great deal of pain, but thanks to his flame steel armor set, he wasn't badly injured. Seth rolled onto his back, and the orc came over and prepared to finish him off. Thinking quickly, Seth pulled out a soul gem and used it to restore his mana. Seth then cast Mage Light directly into the orc's eyes. The orc dropped his hammer and then took a step backward. Seth jumped to his feet and grabbed the warhammer. He then took it and slammed it right into the body of the orc, which sent the orc stumbling back a few steps. Seth took that chance to take off again before the other orc processed what had happened and joined in. Seth put the orcish warhammer into his inventory and continued fleeing deeper into the forest. He was now running through the forest trying to escape from a pair of orcs that were chasing him. As he was running, he noticed there was a cliff coming up, which was really bad as the orcs were right behind him. Seth looked down, and it was a very long way down. He thought about it for a minute. It looked like there was some sort of lake below, but it was so far down he couldn't be entirely sure. He then looked behind him. The orcs had caught up, and they had murderous smiles on their faces. Seth's options were to try and climb down slowly, which would likely make it easy for the orcs to throw rocks down at him and send him plummeting to his death anyways, to fight them, which Seth was still sure he couldn't win that fight, or jump off the cliff and hope to land in the lake. Seth was far from a coward. He merely liked to choose the best outcome for him, and right now all his choices seemed to lead to his death. He might as well take all the bandits' loot with him. He looked at the orcs, winked, and then waved as he took a step backward. He saw the orcs run over to the edge looking horrified. perhaps because even for moralless bandits they thought Seth was crazy, or because they knew they just failed to regain their treasure hoard that Seth had stolen. Either way, they weren't Seth's problem anymore. The fall was. He spun himself around and stretched his limbs out to slow the fall. As he got closer to the ground, he felt relieved. There was indeed a large lake. He hit the water and was submerged by several feet. Once he stopped going down, he began to swim upwards. As he came out of the water and gasped for air, he felt incredibly lucky he landed where he did. It was deep in that spot, but a few feet in front of him was barely knee-deep. Had he landed there, he would have for sure broken some bones or even died. He swam in the water until he got to a spot where he could stand. That made it a lot easier to move around since he was wearing full armor. He trudged through the water until he made it to land. Once on solid ground, he fell to the ground and just stayed there. He was exhausted, and all of that was a lot to process mentally. After all, he nearly died. He was hoping to get time for a break, but the adventure was far from over. He suddenly felt a magical presence coming from an item in his inventory. He looked inside and found the source was the Jewel of Change. Sitting inside the box was a fabulous gem, one he'd never seen before. It was unlike any gem he'd ever come across. Its cut was that of a crescent moon, and it was changing colors. He picked it up and inspected it. A sudden look of dread appeared on his face as he noticed the Jewel of Change was cracked. He had no idea if it was like that when he grabbed it, or if it happened after he was hit by the orc. Seth was about to grieve his massive payday when the gem suddenly got much brighter, and then it shot a blast of magic outward into him. The blast covered his entire body and caused him to pass out. Hey everyone, Riley here. I hope you liked that story. If you did, please consider leaving a like. It would mean a lot to me. You could also check out my Patreon page, where I release written versions of all my stories. It also helps support my work. The link should be in the description, or somewhere. Oh gosh, I sure hope it didn't leave again.